Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Joining me now is Michael Rectenwald. He is author of the new book, Beyond Woke, which comes out May 18th, as well as Google Archipelago, The Digital Gulag, and the Simulation of Freedom. Michael, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
So I read this Breitbart story. It was very disturbing to me about USC and Emory universities creating a coronavirus surveillance system. Tell me about that.
Well, they're using apps and contact tracing via apps to keep track of every person and all the contacts that they make, and to follow up with those contacts and basically keep a complete system of tracing every move that everybody makes with reference to everybody else, such that now we have a system that represents a potential for what we might call social credit scoring based on a pretext of the coronavirus containment. It's interesting because it's based on a medical claim, and the medical claim is coming on the skirts of a Chinese originated pandemic, and it's bringing us to create a Chinese-like social credit scoring system, which happens throughout the entire Chinese nation and is connected with the smart city. The social credit scoring is a way of rating individuals based on what they do using the smart city tracking system, which tracks every movement of every person.
Can you give me sort of a real-life example of a social credit scoring system and what exactly that means to someone's daily life?
So say you're living in China, or for that matter, Darwin, Australia, that adopted smart city technology. You have a certain credit score based on, well, in China, it's based on the state's estimation of your compliance with the Chinese Communist Party's prerogatives. If you, in fact, leave the city or try to leave the city, say, of Wuhan, but your social credit score is too low to allow that travel, an alarm will go off in effect, a notification that will be sent to the proper agencies. In effect, then they will then detain you for trying to leave a particular province. Or say you want to buy a piece of property, if your social credit score is too low, that is your social credit score based on your basic compliance with the state, you won't be allowed to buy said property, or you won't be allowed to send a child to a private school, or so on and so forth. There's just a whole lot of your entire social life is determined by this score. So that's the context of China. And now in the context of the Chinese originated Wuhan virus, we're now seeing the kind of tracking and tracing that is, endemic to China, not endemic to it, but rather originating from China and now spreading out here. So not only they have sent us the virus, they have effectively seeded the conditions for the same kind of tracking that they're doing there. It's a very disturbing development.
What is the practical application then for a USC or an Emory or any other university that wants to adopt something like this? What is the practical reality for students on that campus or prospective students? What does that mean to them?
Well, what it turns out to accomplish is to, first of all, track every move they make. Secondly, to track every contact they have. So effectively, you find out exactly what kind of life somebody's leading in terms of their associations and in terms of their movements. It becomes a way of having a kind of omniscience with reference to individual activity. And this is just a kind of, it's a kind of establishment of a surveillance system, a surveillance state. And they're doing it within universities, but it's soon to be metastasized into the larger social body. And of course, cities are going to be adopting this as well. So what we're having is a complete surveillance system being established on the pretext of the Wuhan virus.
What authority do these universities have to create systems like this?
It's very interesting. I mean, there's a kind of implicit suggestion that they have the right to do so, but I would suggest that this is a violation of our constitutional rights in the United States and probably every resident of the United States, not only citizens, because the constitutional rights, as the left maintains, are supposed to apply to everybody here. But they're being abrogated in it by systems like this without any discussion, apparently, on the part of the universities who just undertake this without, it seems, without consideration of constitutional rights, just as they have with their bias reporting hotlines in over 260 universities across the country. So now we have not only speech being monitored and denied and punished, but we have movements being tracked, traced, and possibly even restricted, so that people will not be allowed to interface with others. And so it's a breach of constitutional rights, potentially. It sets up the conditions for that, definitely, for breaching constitutional rights.
So Emory University is a private school. USC is public. What sort of oversight should there be? I mean, I'm sort of skeptical that the California legislature or the governor would be too concerned about this because they're progressives and they don't mind the sort of control. What sort of oversight should there be from constitutional conservatives, people who believe in individual liberty and all of that sort of thing?
Even constitutional liberals should be concerned.
Right.
Like Jonathan Turley, for example, and I think he would be, and probably would inveigh against this. I would think that in state schools, it's very clear that these are public state schools, and therefore they don't have any wall between the public sphere and their university. There is no differentiation between a state school and a state as such. So therefore it's incumbent upon them to protect constitutional rights within that setting. In terms of private schools, the question is whether there's an implicit acquiescence or signing off on the school's prerogatives with reference to that. For example, in terms of speech, private schools can say, well, this is private. You don't really have the First Amendment, for example, doesn't apply because we have a private institution and we can say what's allowed and what's not. And you have effectively signed over your rights to us on that basis. Well, the problem is that they are operating like states. Similarly to Google and Facebook and Twitter and all social media, they're operating like states. They're being endowed with state power, and they're serving as extensions and, I should say, amplifications of state power, and yet they're saying that they're private domains. And that represents a real tension and a problem that needs to be addressed.
Tell me about your book, Beyond Woke, that's coming out next week.
Well, Beyond Woke suggests that the woke culture is a totalitarianism or an incipient totalitarianism, and that wokeness represents compulsion to behave a certain way, and that it's therefore not a moral system, but it takes away your moral prerogatives, it takes away your rights, it acts like it institutes a set of red guards to police you. It's a policing mechanism, it's a policing culture. It's a horrible development in the West, and it needs to be opposed strenuously, which I do in this book.
Great. Michael Rectenwald, author of the new book, Beyond Woke, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It's been great.
A compelling new book compares President Trump to Winston Churchill. Stay with me. It's The Kyle Olson Show.